So I went through with my highlighter. I'm going to try. Looks like soon as I think we're going to start. It's okay. Welcome to the Village Board meeting of June 4th, 2025. We will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening by our village clerk, Manal Desai.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the meeting is officially called to order, and I would ask our village clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Pierce-Lovan.
Here.
Trustee Schechter.
Here.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Here.
Trustee Robinson.
Here.
Trustee Iverson.
Here.
Trustee Lissa Levy.
Here.
Mayor Tennis.
Here, and we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? If not, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. Is there a second by Trustee Pierce-Lovan? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Lissa Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovan.
Aye.
Trustee Schechter.
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson.
Aye.
Trustee Iverson.
Aye.
And the motion passes. We have a number of proclamations this evening. We've got a lot to celebrate. I'm going to read two of them, and then Trustee Robinson is going to do us the honor of reading the Juneteenth proclamation. So I'll start by reading the proclamation for Immigrant Heritage Month. Whereas generations of immigrants have settled in the United States from every corner of the globe and have built our country's economy and created the unique character of our nation, and whereas nearly all of us can trace our heritage to another nation, and we must never forget where we came from and why our ancestors came here, and whereas immigrants continue to grow businesses, offer innovative ideas, strengthen our economy, and create jobs in Illinois and throughout our nation. Whereas immigrants provide neighborhoods in the village of Skokie with unique social and cultural influence, fundamentally enriching the extraordinary character of our hometown. And whereas immigrants have been tireless leaders in securing their own rights and access to equal opportunity, but have also persevered to create a fairer and more just society for all Americans. And whereas the village of Skokie will continue to support more inclusive and just policies. And whereas immigration enhances the village of Skokie's culture and prosperity, as foreign-born individuals and their families continue to diversify our neighborhoods and strengthen our economy. And whereas the residents of the village of Skokie represent over 100 countries and over 90 different languages are spoken within the homes of our community. Now therefore I, Ann Tennis, Mayor of the village of Skokie, do hereby proclaim June 2025 as Immigrant Heritage Month in the village of Skokie and do urge all citizens to join in this celebration. The next proclamation is for Pride Month. And before I read the proclamation, I would like to recognize some individuals, both elected and staff, from the Skokie Park District. Park Board President Susan Aberman is with us this evening. Vice President Ezra Jaffe is here as well. And Commissioner Courtney Williams is here, who will be receiving the proclamation and speaking to us for a few minutes, and the Park District Executive Director and longtime friend of the village, Michelle Tuft. So welcome to all of you this evening. Whereas Skokie welcomes everyone, and we are a village committed to equity and inclusion for all residents. And whereas Skokie has a thriving lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ+ community, including people of all ethnicities, religions, and professions. And whereas the month of June is designated as Pride Month to commemorate the Stonewall Uprising in New York City in June of 1969, which is widely recognized as a catalyst of the LGBTQ+ rights movement. And whereas we reaffirm that LGBTQ+ rights are human rights, we support the diversity of sexual and gender identities in Skokie, and we stand against intolerance and discrimination to all people. And whereas the fabric of our community is strengthened by justice and love. Now therefore I, Ann Tennis, Mayor of the Village of Skokie, do hereby proclaim the month of June as Pride Month in the Village of Skokie, and encourage residents to celebrate this month with programs and activities, including the Skokie Pride event on Sunday, June 22nd, 2025, at Oakton Park. Commissioner Williams, if you'll join me at the podium.
Thank you, Mayor Tennis. And I'm not going to use the microphone because I went to Northwestern, so my parents paid for me to be able to do this. As the mayor mentioned, my name is Courtney Williams, and I am a member of the Skokie Park District Board. And I just want to offer a heartfelt thank you for this Pride Proclamation, and really for your support of inclusivity, of equality, and respect for all members of the community. When we think about Skokie, we really do welcome all. And the fact that we have a Pride Proclamation and Pride programming for LGBTQ+ individuals is so important. And I think we can recognize now more than ever this type of visible support and programming is incredibly important. And again, just want to thank you so much for your continued support of our programming. Encourage everyone to come out to our Skokie Pride programming and not just celebrate Pride in June, which is Pride Month, but throughout the rest of the year, because we want to welcome all and all of our members of the community all throughout the year. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. And now Trustee Keith Robinson will read the Juneteenth proclamation.
Beautiful, and thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to read the proclamation. Whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, ordering the freedom of all people enslaved in Confederate territory, and whereas on June 19th, 1865, Union Major General Gordon Granger announced the end of the Civil War and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas, legally freeing the last of the Confederacy's enslaved people. And whereas Juneteenth, also known as Emancipation Day or Freedom Day, has been a tradition in the United States for more than 150 years, commemorating the Galveston announcement and celebrating the freedom of African Americans. And whereas continued anti-black violence and systemic racism compel us to acknowledge and reckon with painful history and legacy of slavery and racial injustice in the United States. And whereas in 1961, the first documented African American family purchased a home in the village of Skokie, and their courage and perseverance, as well as the establishment of the Skokie Human Relations Commission in 1961, and the passage of the first Fair Housing Ordinance in 1968, paved the way for thousands of black residents of African American and diverse ethnic cultures who currently call Skokie home. And whereas black leaders in education, government, business, faith communities, journalism, science, sports, and entertainment, those both known and those uncredited, have enriched Skokie, Chicagoland, and the country the world. And whereas we believe that through love and equity, we can take steps to together ensure full freedom and opportunity for all, this year's community Juneteenth celebration in the village of Skokie will take place on June 14th, 2025, under the theme of Community Unity. Now, therefore, I, she, Ann Tennis, the mayor of Village of Skokie, Illinois, do hereby declare June 19th, 2025 as Juneteenth in the Village of Skokie and urge all residents to recognize the significance of this celebration in African American history and in the heritage of our nation and village. Past this 4th day of June 2025.
Trustee Robinson and I will go to the podium in a moment. I'd like to recognize Nancy Kim Phillips with the Skokie Public Library, Brian Williams with Skokie United, Natasha Lavalius with District 69, Samina Hussein with District 219, and our own Sergeant Brandy Shelton from the Skokie Police Department, who are here tonight to represent the Juneteenth Committee.
Don't go anywhere, come on.
He keeps reminding us of community unity.
Yes, yes. I'm Brian Williams. I want to thank you for this honor. I represent Skokie United. Our goal is to bring our community together through all of our identities, really, and that includes minorities as our LGBTQ community. That includes our many that are underrepresented in many ways. And this particular day, June 14th, is when we celebrate, but June 19th is really historic and important because we don't always recognize African Americans in our community. We recognize cultural differences, we recognize a lot of things, but sometimes we just don't point out, let's recognize the Black Americans of our community. And we couldn't celebrate this without a tribe of people who've come together, and there's a number of organizations that have been recognized. The police department, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. The village, the library, the park district, the school districts, Oakton College, a number of organizations that have helped support and help plan this event. And this is our 5th year that we're doing this. And none of it would be possible without community unity. It's a fact, it's not a cliche. So I'm very proud to be a representative of this. I welcome you all to come and celebrate this American Historic Day on June 14th. At Oakton Park. We will celebrate, we'll have fun, we will share resources and information, we will help people to understand you are a part of this community. Whether you're African American, Black, or not, you are welcome to be a part of this celebration. We recognize that this particular day is to celebrate Juneteenth, but we also recognize that this particular day is to celebrate Skokie, so thank you.
Thank you. We now have our allotted time for public comments. 3 minutes per person. Nick, is the shot clock? Yep, shot clock's in action. Would anyone like to address the board before we proceed with the agenda? Sure. Please provide us with your first and last name.
Irvin Schiffman, live on Howard Street in Skokie. Good evening, Madam Mayor and trustees. The 187 Boxing Club has already obtained a event sanction for August 3rd. They've previously hosted an event in Skokie, and the club is very nearby, but May 28th, 2023 at the Assyrian Center. And I want to know how we can approach it to have this event outside. And after hearing everything just now, there's nothing more multicultural and multi-ethnic than amateur boxing. I had possibly the idea of having it on Main Street, but just wanted to know how to proceed to try and have this event outside this year. This is the umbrella group is USA Olympic Committee. There's no approval needed by the state of Illinois. Amateur boxing is, a totally separate entity, but I know we would need, village permission to have, an event outside.
Mr. Shipman, thank you for bringing this to our attention. There is a process that is administered through the village manager's office for special events. So someone who's affiliated with the group should contact our village manager's office to be walked through the process.
Okay. All right, good.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello there. My name is Jim Barnard. I represent Go Green Skokie. We would like to ask if it's possible to extend the rebates on the electric leaf blowers and electric lawn mowers. We think that's a very successful program. Go Green Skokie will be talking up these pieces of equipment all summer now. So if that has expired, it doesn't encourage us as much. We would love to see that continued, and we'll try to drive more people to buy these things and come collect the rebates. Is that possible?
I will tell you that when I read through our voucher list for this evening, I was excited to see so many rebates going to residents, so the program is popular. We do budget a fixed amount of money every year for this. I am going to defer to the village manager on where we're at.
So the village board is considering the budget this evening, and within the budget that started May 1, there is this continuation of the program. And so the program is alive and well, and so it continues until that line item is exhausted. And so we're pleased that the community's interested in it. Thank you for your support and advocating for the program, and the mayor and board and staff share your passion for this program.
All right, well, Go Green Skokie will back that, and we'll let people know about it. We'll make sure that everybody knows.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board? If not, we'll proceed with our agenda. The next item is the report of our village manager, John Lockerbie.
Thank you, Mayor Tennis and Village Board, and good evening, everyone. Tonight, item A is regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 2026 budget. The memorandum included in the packet this evening is a summary of the actions and decisions made by the Mayor and Board of Trustees during their review of the budget. These actions are the result of 3 public hearings conducted by the board in May. In summary, the FY 2026 general fund budget, or commonly known as the operating budget, equates to $73,859,523. All funds, including water, pension, economic development, motor fuel and local fuel tax, self-insurance, general obligation, bonded debt, tax increment financing, federal aid, the Performing Arts Center, Convention and Visitors Bureau, special service areas, wireless alarms, and capital improvement program total $169,042,279. Board approval of the FY 2026 budget is respectfully requested.
Thank you, John. We need a motion for approval of the fiscal year 2026 budget. Is there a motion? Moved by Trustee Robinson. Is there a second? Moved by Trustee Lissa Levy. Any comments or discussion? Trustee Schechter.
This is just a comment. I just really want to commend Mr. Lockerbie and the staff for pulling together this budget. It was a monumental task and really well done, and all of the boards and commissions also, they came before us. And I just wanted to mention one thing that I think is wonderful. You know, I often talk about budgets because I direct, just as Trustee Pure Slovan, an organization, so we know that budgets are moral documents, they're political documents. And one of the things I love in this budget is we start with 4 goals for Skokie. So those are around service delivery, fiscal responsibility, public health, and sustainability and development. And you can read those. And I just feel like those are excellent. I would add a fifth, which I would call connection and connectivity, which is the extent to which our programs, policies, and their delivery contribute to collaboration. We have that. And I just want to, lift that up. So, for example, connecting land and people and wildlife as part of the sustainability plan, promoting sense of community and civic engagement, and all our cross-systems work, whether it's around rat abatement, youth engagement in jobs, an age-friendly or walkable Skokie, things like the co-responder program, all the work of Health and Human Services, mixed income housing. These are all great things that promote, that sort of militate against silos. And I just think that's a really good thing. I just wanted to lift that up as that we have these through lines in our budget.
Thank you, Trustee Schechter. Any other comments? Trustee Iverson.
I'd just like to add, as a comment, that the size of the budget, it's very complex and thorough, highly detailed, and that's daunting, I think, to regular people. However, it is very accessible, and if you start at the beginning, you can find the areas that interest you and be directed towards the details that you want to follow up on. I bring it up to encourage everybody to take some time and look at the budget. We'll be going through this again in just 1 year, much shorter than 1 year actually, and that's all I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Trustee Iverson. After this evening, our communications staff, working in concert with the village manager's office, will create a budget at a glance that will make the figures and the priorities of this fiscal year 26 budget even more accessible to residents. So looking forward to that, and it will be distributed and on the website and made available. Any other comments? Not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Lista Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Purslovan?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
And the motion passes. The next item on our agenda is a presentation on the village's residential rental unit standards and neighborhood integrity program, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. So look forward to an informative presentation. Johanna Knighton, our Community Development Director, Police Chief Jesse Barnes, Health and Human Services Director Mike Charlie, Officer Rich Wilkin, and Angel Schnur from our Property Standards Division. Thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, Johanna Knighton, Community Development Director. We are going to walk through this ordinance, but first, the mayor already gave us a lovely welcome. We comprise multiple departments across the village that support and implement the neighborhood integrity ordinance. This is not just an ordinance, it's an approach to how we work to support and sustain neighborhoods throughout Skokie with high-quality housing. In addition to the departments represented here, we also work with our fire department, our legal department, and the village manager's office. A little history and background. The neighborhood integrity ordinance was adopted in January of 2014, so we're well into our double digits of years with this ordinance on the books. It was a series of code requirements that enabled the village to require training of landlords to make sure that they were learning the best practices for managing their property, their residential properties. It established a requirement that brought village inspectors into properties so we could see the conditions and make sure that landlords were making adjustments to common areas and exterior elements of buildings to make sure that they were more code compliant. We established an annual fee for the rental registration, $25 a unit, and in cases where landlords were compliant, though that fee was waived after 3 years of good compliance. We introduced a crime-free housing addendum. And finally, we have worked to require a more consistent approach to the landlord and tenant relationships, and to make sure that tenants are treated fairly and in accordance with fair housing laws. So before I turn it over, I just wanted to offer a little introduction to the rest of the presentation. The ordinance is a tool. It creates structure and how we approach creating good neighborhoods and good safe spaces in our community. But it's more than just codes, it's relationships. It fosters positive communication throughout our community. So Chief Barnes is going to take us through a little bit of what his department does.
Sure.
And then we'll turn it over to the rest of the team.
I think the biggest thing to remember as far as the police department's involvement in this is it really establishes a structured relationship between the police department and landlords and tenants. We have the designated police liaison, the neighborhood standards or neighborhood integrity officer, that is kind of a clearinghouse for concerns that come from tenants and concerns that come from landlords. We believe that obviously community safety it's a partnership with everybody. We have other community partners. We had some from the Park District here earlier. We obviously have a relationship with the school districts. We have the beat meetings. We have our block watch captains. Those are all partnerships within the community that make the community safer. This is just an extension of those. We have clear guidelines, consistency. Obviously, consistency is important for accountability when it comes to situations where there does need to be enforcement. And having a designated liaison that can be a go-to for a landlord that has a question or a tenant that has a concern is important for us. Our people are out there interacting with all segments, landlords, tenants, for a variety of calls for service. It's important for our officers to have somebody that they can point those people to for resources and get consistent information and have some subject matter experts in that realm. So this empowers landlords as partners in community safety, like I said, in a proactive way. It's not in a punitive way. It's letting them know the rules up front, making sure that some of these landlords, this is not their full-time job. So it's important for us to do training and education, make sure that they're not violating the rights of their tenants. And also when tenants have concerns and they don't want to go to their landlord with them, a lot of times when people don't know who to go to, they call us. So we want to be able to, if they call communications or they're interacting with an officer on the street, point them to somebody who's got a little bit extra training in this realm to point them in the right direction. So we're really strengthening the tenant protections through collaboration as well as educating the landlords. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Charlie from Health to talk a little bit about what they do with it.
Thanks, Jesse. So, good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees. My name is Mike Charlie, and I'm the Health and Human Services Director for the Village. So, and I thank you guys for this opportunity tonight. I'm honored to provide an overview of Skokie's Fair Housing Ordinance and to illustrate how it works in concert with the Neighborhood Integrity Ordinance to advance the village's commitment to equity, safety, and community well-being. Skokie has a proud and progressive history in advancing equitable housing. In fact, as Trustee Robinson mentioned earlier, in 1968 it was passed, but in 1969 the Fair Housing Ordinance was effective, and we were actually one of the first municipalities in the entire state of Illinois to pass a Fair Housing Ordinance, demonstrating our long-standing dedication to civil rights and community inclusivity. So the Fair Housing Ordinance guarantees that every individual has the right to access housing free from discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, gender, disability, marital status, as well as many other protected characteristics. It is not only rooted in law, but grounded in the values that define Skokie as a welcoming and inclusive community. To ensure these protections are meaningful, the Human Rights Commission is authorized to investigate complaints of discrimination, hold public hearings, and impose remedies and penalties where appropriate. This local oversight ensures that Skokie residents have access to timely, responsive support when facing housing-related discrimination. So, where the Fair Housing Ordinance ensures equal access, the Neighborhood Integrity ordinance promotes safe and responsible housing practices. And in many sections of the neighborhood integrity ordinance, it refers to the fair housing. Together, they establish a comprehensive framework that supports both tenant protections and community integrity. Key components of the neighborhood integrity ordinance that specifically reference the fair housing ordinance include landlord education. All landlords have to attend a village-led seminar that includes fair housing training, and this helps ensure that landlords understand their legal obligations and the values underpinning them. There's also a section on tenant awareness. Before showing the rental unit, even before showing it, the landlord is responsible for providing prospective tenants with fair housing information. This promotes transparency and empowers residents with knowledge of their rights from the onset of that relationship. And then there's staff training. Key personnel, including members of the police department and property standards division, receive ongoing fair housing training, which reinforces consistency and equity in enforcement practices across departments. The last thing I wanted to mention was the last bullet point on community mediation. So the Health and Human Services Department has a partnership with the Northwest Municipal Conference and the Center for Conflict Resolution, where we offer neutral professional mediation services. These services allow landlords and tenants to resolve these disputes constructively, often avoiding legal proceedings and fostering healthier landlord-tenant relationships. So in conclusion, together these ordinances reflect more than just the municipal code. They represent Skokie's deeply held commitment to dignity, safety, and opportunity for all Skokie residents. And by aligning legal enforcement with education, as everyone here is going to represent tonight, and community resources, we ensure that Skokie remains a place where everyone can thrive and live. So I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to provide a little bit of information about the Fair Housing Ordinance. And up next is Officer Rich Wilkins of the Skokie Police Department.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Officer Rich Wilkin. I've been the Crime Prevention and Community Relations Officer in the Police Department since 2017. And with the retirement of Officer Marzigliano, who was the Neighborhood Standards Officer approximately 2 days ago, I have now taken on the role of Neighborhood Standards Officer as well. I had the benefit of not only interacting with community, but also interacting with Officer Marzigliano while he administered the program. So I have some opportunity to understand the program, not only as a police officer in the department, but also as a landlord myself. I've been a tenant, like possibly many of you. I also have properties in other municipalities that fall underneath the crime-free housing program, and also have incorporated a lot of the tenets of the crime-free lease addendum into my leases for my units as well. So I am deeply ingrained in a lot of the safety-related concepts of the ordinance. Within the ordinance, the concepts that are run through the police department are really the rental unit registration alongside property standards, requiring the landlords to register the majority of the rental units that fall within the program. Also, the the mandatory landlord training seminar that's required of everyone that with their property if they're going to rent it out, and it falls within those guidelines. Additionally, the crime-free lease addendum, which I'll touch on here briefly, it also introduces the neighborhood standards officer role, which is a resource for not only landlords through the program, tenants. I have the opportunity to review some of the reports that come in. It's also a resource for neighbors, for other community organizations. So it's kind of like, as Chief Barnes said, a clearinghouse, where many of the housing-related issues or neighbor-related issues are being funneled to this position in the police department. It also, the integrity ordinance establishes a whole of village approach, as many have spoke about before me, creating the concept that this isn't one program just necessarily run by the police department. It is a village-wide program that is to impact all residents, including our rental residents, in a positive way and promote safe housing and bring all services together. It also introduces the concept of crime prevention through environmental design, and which in my position as the crime prevention community relations officer, I've gone out several years and done what we call security surveys, which we offer not only to landlords, but to tenants, but to residents, businesses. Everyone in the village is able to take advantage of this opportunity, have a trained officer who's trained in the crime prevention concepts that can give an overview of their property or maybe the business operation that they're running, and give them some tips and strategies on how to maintain safety for not only their occupants, but their properties as well. And it's really geared towards community and resident safety. Just to highlight on some of the things about the landlord seminar, the seminar includes a review of the neighborhood integrity ordinance and the rental registration ordinance, and that's in conjunction with property standards. It introduces the neighborhood standards officer as a liaison, not just to landlords in the program, but also to their tenants, and also to the neighbors. It introduces the crime-free lease addendum and some of the tenets of the crime-free lease addendum, which is an additional rider to the lease that the village requires by ordinance that the landlords and the tenants agree to. And it's required of all the units that are covered under the rental registration program. So there's a requirement that all occupants of the unit over the age of 18 agree to the crime-free lease addendum. And it addresses criminal activity, including Class A misdemeanors on or near the property and felony criminal activity anywhere. And this addendum creates a civil agreement between the landlord and the tenant, and outlines a lot of expectations for safety, not just in the unit, but also in the neighborhood and in the community. And then, just like every civil case, because it's an agreement, the preponderance of the evidence in that is a proof is the agreement. So some of the strategies that are talked about through the crime prevention through environmental design portion of the seminar are really about maintaining the safety and integrity of the neighborhood. So what we term as SEPTED, so we talk about those. We talk about routine and pre-sale inspections under the program. We offer those security surveys, and they're, like I said, available to anyone. We also really promote those concepts to reduce the opportunities for crime that are presented by the physical environment. Just as a note, I had the opportunity, since I've been in this position 2 days now, to talk to a landlord who I also had the opportunity to talk to approximately 2 years ago about a traffic issue at her property. So unrelated, the traffic issue was really about people cutting through her property, but I identified that she had some other issues, and so I was able to funnel her over to Officer Marzigliano so she could address some of the tenant issues that she was having on her property. But she was able to fill me in on that she had a positive outcome. She had a tenant that had some personal issues with someone, and they were able to implement some of these crime prevention strategies by changing maybe some of the landscaping and things like that that actually eliminated the opportunity for those security concerns for the tenant. So that was a positive outcome for that. But we talk about natural surveillance, which is designing the spaces for maximum visibility, access control, making sure doors are locked, things like that. We talk about territorial concern, which is simply making it clear that the property is owned and cared for or even leased. You know, we have long-term tenants who have been in units for a very long time, and they have an ownership. Even if they don't own the physical unit, they do have an ownership in that property. Right, so we talk about that, and we talk about activity support and what the property can actually can handle. Right, maybe there's an opportunity to give the residents of that property the ability to maybe have a patio in the back where they can join together, but also by being together, they can also keep an eye on the property. So that's some of the things. And then maintenance, the expectation that property owners should take care of their property and to create vibrant spaces and neighborhoods that all residents can enjoy. I'd like to turn that over to Ms. Schnurr from Property Standards.
Thank you. My name is Angel Schnurr, and I'm the Building and Inspection Services Manager, and I oversee the Property Standards Inspectors, the division that works in conjunction with the Police Department and the Health Department to make sure that we are providing as safe housing as possible to our residents in Skokie. One of the things I want to highlight is that this program is not just about us coming to do inspections. It's not just about the police responding to calls for service. It's really a joint effort among all of the village staff and the residents. We have expectations in this program for landlords. They have to maintain their property. They have to follow the ordinances. They have to do the registration requirements. We have requirements for tenants. They have to keep their space clean. They have to make sure that the landlord can get in to do the repairs that they need to do. And then we as a village have responsibilities to respond to concerns and to be available to help whenever possible. So it really is a joint effort for this program. We offer 3 different ways in the Property Standards Division that we can help ensure that our housing is safe. We have a village inspection program, what we call routine rental inspections, and we inspect the interior common areas and the exterior areas of rental properties to make sure that the landlords are maintaining those properties safe for the tenants that are living there, but also safe and nice and agreeable to the neighborhood. So we do inspections of exterior and common elements. We also have a pre-sale inspection requirement, so any rental property that is being transferred undergoes an inspection. That inspection encompasses the entire building, interior and exterior common areas, as well as unit inspections. Under this program, we inspect the units prior to the sale to make sure that those units are being transferred in good condition. If there's violations observed, we work with the owner towards compliance. That is always our goal. Sometimes we have to take measures to get there, but we always want to work with them. We also offer complaint inspections for tenants as well as landlords. If you're not doing a pre-sale and you're not under the routine inspection program yet, you can call us and let us know that you have an issue. We will schedule a time to come out and take a look at your unit. If you need us for any of those maintenance issues where you need to make sure that the landlord is doing his job or your tenant is taking care of their responsibility, we are a resource for you under that. So that's what we provide to you for this program. Thank you.
Okay, so we're coming into close. So we wanted to share this this graph. This shows this is data from our community survey that we've done this for 20 years, every 3 years. The green line here is when the neighborhood integrity ordinance was adopted, but also the intentional engagement with the community around housing matters really started in organized and coordinated fashion. The lines all trend up, so whether you can see or read the fine print, but the blue line is neighborhood as a place to live, yellow is crime prevention, orange is safety of neighborhood during the day, and overall feeling of safety. So everything moved in a positive trend upward following this engagement, the ordinance adoption.
Lastly, we just put some resources up here. I want to highlight that this is a resource-based model for addressing problems, right? So it's not just enforcement, it's problem solving rather than punishment in most situations. And we really want to make sure that we can link people up with resources, whether they are tenants or landlords, or education and training, to make sure that we all, take part in trying to solve these problems. And so all of us feel that this program is really beneficial to all the stakeholders. And thank you for giving us the time to present on it.
Thank you for preparing such a thoughtful presentation. And what I'm struck by is, to me, the fact that we have 3 departments in the village who are collaborating on this and have just made it better and stronger in the last, now I see 11 years. That speaks to what Trustee Schechter said when we were considering the budget for approval. Those interdisciplinary collaborations really keep things running on a smooth and strong path here. So thank you for your hard work on this, all of you, and for your creativity and flexibility. You've made some changes through the years as have been needed. Questions? We'll start with Trustee Pierce-Lovan, and then Trustee Schechter, and then Trustee Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I was going to start by commenting also on the
department, but okay, you guys have said it well, you don't need to hear from me again, but thank you, and it is a pleasure to see you all work together. I have a few things. First is approximate. How many complaints a year do you think that the village receives?
It's a hard number to gauge. We have neighbor disputes all over the place at times. Some of those will go to Officer Wilkin, now formerly Officer Marzigliano. We provide, our officers on scene, when they're dealing with those problems, will provide resources and steer people towards either Angel or Rich now, Joe Marzigliano previously. We don't always know who follows up with them because they have those conversations, and a lot of those problems are just solved through education. Or, as we all know, a lot of problems are miscommunication or lack of communication. So if we can be that conduit for communication, a lot of times it never goes any further than that. So we're not tracking the outcome between the residents if the problem is resolved. A lot of times we just don't end up back at the residents.
And do we know that the problem's been resolved then because the resident hasn't followed up and continued to complain? But how do you know it's been solved?
Well, in some situations, we get feedback from the landlords later on that the problem is resolved. In others, we might not get that feedback.
Thank you. And the next question I have is safety assessment. Does the village receive a lot of requests for that?
Security surveys?
Step up to the mic.
Yeah. I would say in an average year, we probably do somewhere around 20.
So do you think that's because people don't know that they could request it?
I think that's one of the things. I also think sometimes people don't know that, or don't recognize that they have the, that I could offer anything, perhaps.
I think that would be a good thing, Mayor, for us to, or village manager, to us to communicate.
Publicity, yep. To push that out to the community.
Sorry.
That is a big part of the training as well. So the landlords that are coming through the training are getting those concepts in that training, and they might not need a site assessment. They might be able to implement some of those things on their own. Lighting changes, landscaping changes, access control, those things are, they're going to get the information they need to implement those up front. So a lot of that might go on in those landlord training seminars quarterly.
So then my follow-up had to do again with who knows, what services we offer in this regard. So I think that would be a wonderful thing for us to communicate to the community, to the residents, to the village, et cetera, however you want to look at it.
Agreed.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you all do.
Thank you.
Trustee Schechter, and then we'll go to Trustee Robinson.
Yes, thanks for this presentation. I have to say, I have some institutional knowledge because way back in 2012, 2013, I was actually part of the effort around making this a fair housing-oriented, protocol. And I was part of this ad hoc landlord-resident committee that we were especially concerned to make sure as a committee that this was not just a matter of police, but also property standards. So I'm glad to see your involvement. So I just have a couple of questions that kind of go back to fair housing. So one of them, which was a concern that we had raised that's in the ordinance, was protecting tenants who were, to use the legalese, non-culpable victims. So victims of domestic violence, people who are in the unit who are not participating in criminal activity. And the ordinance says that they shall not be evicted for the reason of the criminal activity, et cetera. But that language is not in the crime-free lease addendum. And I was wondering if there's any effort to review that lease addendum, because tenants may not be aware that they have that right.
Sure. We can certainly talk through that with legal. I was not involved as deeply as you were in the development, but that is certainly something that is handled through the education of the landlords, making sure that they understand that, and also in follow-up conversations with the neighborhood standards officer when they call with concerns. That would be something that we would talk through and kind of flesh out in more detail in those conversations. And if something does get into a situation where a landlord is taking action, obviously that's where the making sure that we link tenants with resources as well is also important.
Trustee, I would
and-
say I would be happy to take a look at that, and if we need to review that or refine that, we certainly can.
Oh, good, because I know a number of groups that would also be willing to
We
help
certainly
somebody.
would review that.
Great, great. And another piece of that as well is in terms of legal protections. Now, part of Illinois law since 2021 is protecting people with criminal backgrounds. Like, because a lot of what's in here is if somebody just has an arrest, and there are some fair housing protections now in place that we might want to take a look at to make sure that that's in compliance, because that's something that came about since this was developed. And then I was wondering too, who is providing the fair housing training? It used to be John Marshall. There's no more John Marshall.
Angel, you want to?
There are multiple people that talk about the fair housing training at the landlord seminar. Historically, it's been Joe Marzigliano talking through the process of interviewing your potential tenants and making sure that you're following the same steps and procedures for each of the people who are applying to reside in your property. And then we also have an attorney who speaks at the end of the class and talks about fair housing and the requirements that they have in terms of being sure that they're following the steps and procedures of the fair housing requirements.
Okay. And that also includes around housing choice vouchers, because I heard
does.
from, okay.
It does. We talk about the fact that that's not something that you can discriminate against. It's a means of income.
Excellent.
Yes.
And then one last thing too, just I was looking at on our website where we have forms on the neighborhood integrity page, and there's this form called eviction notification, and it may be a little bit alarming to people as to what this signifies, but it puts here date items will be placed outside the residence. I mean, people might think, oh wow, I can't. No one can put my stuff out without a court order and a sheriff. So I just wanted to raise that concern about this form.
Okay. We can. I know that we put that in place in conjunction with Public Works, because we didn't want people to have their items put on the curb and people go picking through them, or us not knowing that they needed to be there for a certain number of days because it was an eviction process and not just to move out where people were throwing stuff away. So this is a way for the landlords to let us know that those items have to stay for that certain number of days that are required by law.
And actually, I'm sorry, one last thing. In terms of property standards, do you have data that shows before and after, code improvements?
Data in terms of photos or in terms of?
Just, violations cured or, yeah.
Not at this time. I don't have that information available to you. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a way to pull that from the system, but I don't have that today.
Yeah, that would be interesting data. That would be very, it's 11 years in, we should have some longitudinal data on that, so thanks.
I don't think that our system would be able to tell you whether the date, from the date of the violation to the date of compliance, whether it specifies whether it's a rental and gone through the rental program or whether it's just a property with violations, but there's got to be a way to provide at least that main number to know from one end to the other.
That would be good. If we haven't tracked it, it would be great if we could start. Trustee Robinson, you've been mighty patient.
Thank you. I can be. Got a couple of things down here. First of all, commend the team. Some of that we've already talked about. I love enforcement and problem solving. Rather than enforcement, problem solving. That takes a more restorative lens. So I appreciate that. I am curious to know, as far as follow-ups and resolutions of potential conflicts and issues, kind of like what happens, right? Like what happens when there's no resolution. And then I'll just add a few more, they kind of connect. Accountability. So how are landlords accountable for their agreement? Are there agreements? Is there a sit down? Is there a letter of agreement? This is what we will do, etc. So I know that all has something to do, and most of all, you know, there used to be that, you know, ratemyteacher.com, you know, these, I wonder if there's a way, you know, to establish a voice for renters, you know, not ratemylandlord.com or something, or maybe, you know, but some mode to say that, you know, my landlord is responsive, you know, they take care of business, which I think, you know, if I'm a landlord, I want to be on that list.
Sure.
You know, so is there a list, you know, where, you know, those landlords who have done what they promise, you know, to do, add me to the list so that people want to come, you know, rent in my property so that I know that they know that I'll be taken care of.
So some of our landlords own a high volume of units within the village, and the program incentivizes, if they are without violations, it incentivizes that by waiving the fee per unit, which is a positive incentive. I think we have landlords that own more than 200 units in town. So if you add that money up, that's a substantial savings, which obviously they can, you know, that's an incentive for them to, you know, abide by all these rules. Going back to your first question, what happens? And then I'm going to probably have you repeat the other one because you lost me between all that. But what happens? So there's a number of outcomes, and we don't track the specific outcomes with the landlords. But I can tell you from past conversations with Officer Marzigliano, in some situations, if you have a problem between two tenants, and we're talking about a landlord that owns 200 units, maybe that landlord says, hey, you know what, this isn't working out. How about you move to this other building over here, and that will alleviate the problems within the building, right? In some other situations, maybe there's, it's coming to the end of a lease agreement and they just decide that they're gonna part ways and go in different directions going forward. So it really depends on the issue that's trying to be solved. Linking up with resources for tenants is not always just resources for problems with the landlord. A lot of times it's with a number of resources through Health and Human Services, sometimes it might be involving our co-responder team. They might step in and help because there might be an underlying mental health issue that is exacerbating some of the problems within the building. So we have the interdisciplinary approach because we all have different tools in our tool belt, and we want to use the tool that's going to be most successful for that targeted issue that they are. And I mean, it's a wide spectrum of issues that we deal with on a regular basis. And some of them are very minor, but it's the most important thing for the people that live in that building that it's impacting their quality of life. If they have one resident that's really impacting their quality of life, it's really important to them that we come up with a solution that's agreeable to everybody. What was the middle question that I missed?
I knew it was a lot. I think you hit most of it. The accountability, I talked about, you know, some, you know, top 10 lists.
Like the Craigslist of
So-
good
yeah,
landlords.
So something else on that. Talking with Rich Wilkin and Joe Marzigliano recently, I would not have guessed this, but it's anecdotally, it has been Rich's experience and Joe's experience. They actually get a lot more calls from tenants than we would expect because that resource has been provided to them by maybe their beat officer, or, you know, during some other interaction with somebody in the building. So I think we get the feedback from the tenants just as much as the landlords are getting it. So I think that's an important kind of feedback loop too, is that if we see a problem, if we think that the tenant's rights are being infringed upon in some way, we can link them up with resources and also then go educate the landlord and say to the landlord, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z, you cannot do these things. And certainly we can get legal involved in those conversations if we need to too. I don't think they've gotten nearly the credit that they should for putting this all together. I know that, you know, a lot has gone into getting us all to kind of work cohesively, so.
Beautiful. I think, you know, anytime, you know, I think the biggest thing too, and I've already heard it, the communication piece. You know, if we don't know that there's an issue, there's no way for anyone to intervene. So I think the more we do explore getting the word out through social media, whatever way that we can do that, you know, residents, if you have issues, if you have concerns, this is your mode of operation. You know, connect, call, do what you need to do.
Absolutely.
And I want to end on a personal story because, what? I had two situations. I had residents reach out to me and talk about, an issue that they had with their landlord. And, that person would come back and give me kind of updates and reports, along the way. And in the end, it was a favorable outcome, but it sounded like it was really a deal. This is something that just kind of continued and was ongoing. And, Ms. Mangler, you did your thing. But I heard that it was not uncomfortable, but in the end, the resident felt heard. And I think a lot of times, folks need to feel like their voice is heard and there's some action behind it. The other story I just wanted to share, it was recent, of folks who may be living in, basement or some area where there's not, it's unsafe and not up to standards. But these folks are stuck. Do I report it? Where now, we've exposed, a safe space, for this family who's trying to, do what they can do for their families. I'm wondering, is there a middle ground there, where these situations can be reported? I know there's some law that there's some protection there, but I'm wondering if just your thoughts, on those particular situations.
Sure, it's a sensitive issue, right? We're not looking for somebody to lose their housing arrangements, but we also obviously are concerned in an unsafe environment, fire hazards and all sorts of things of that nature. And that's where we would probably go to health for some resources through some of the social services. There's all sorts of connections with the homeless. There's all sorts of organizations out there that can help us if there does need to be, some resources to seek those resources. And we would have to get creative in some of those situations.
And thank you for saying that. And for those residents who find themselves in those uncomfortable situations, no, it's not always a gotcha. It's, hey, thank you for sharing, so now I know so that I can support and help and connect resources.
Right. Thank you.
Goes back to that problem solving. Trustee Schechter?
Yeah, another question about what's in the ordinance, just wondering what happened. So, and speaking about being heard, one of the things that was built into the ordinance was that if there was an eviction being contemplated, that either the tenant or the landlord could file a written request to a nuisance intervention and prevention committee, or the NIP committee. And I just wonder, has that ever been constituted? Have they ever met? Has that ever been activated?
So I can speak to that. They have met over the last 10 years. A lot of times there was a discussion if there was a problem at a certain property. We would discuss it with Joe Merzigliano, and more times than not, he would reach out to either the tenant or the landlord, and there was a resolution. There has never been, to my knowledge, an eviction based on this.
Trustee Kamani Levy?
I just have one quick. Thank you so much for presenting. Chief Barnes and I have briefly chatted about this. I just have one quick question. I received an article. There's an alarming trend of residents being charged egregious move-in fees. Is that part of the training, and could it be part of the training if it's not?
I don't know that it is, but it certainly is something we can add to the mix.
Yeah, or if there's like, if, I don't know if Skokie has some sort of restriction to charge a deposit fee versus a move-in fee, but making sure that that move-in fee, if it is available, that it's not outrageous and egregious, and it is actually being used for something that is helpful to the resident. And thank you so much for, I should have said this earlier, Keith had the same idea about some sort of repository for residents. There's nothing worse than signing a one-year lease to find out that your landlord takes like 2 months to fix a toilet, or there's a noisy tenant upstairs and you're
Sure.
stuck. So I think something like that would be really helpful to residents or tenants.
Thank you.
So what I would say to, with regard to move-in fees and so forth and so on, you have to realize that a lease is a contract between a tenant and a landlord, and there's only so much intervention that we can do. If these are charges that they are charging, that tenant could ask them to be waived or so forth and so on. We don't regulate that.
So thank you, everyone. This was a great presentation. Great. Oh, I'm so sorry, Trustee Iverson.
This will be quick. And I've witnessed the positive effects of the work that you have all done. And so as a landlord, I'm grateful. The tenants. Yeah, one of you mentioned that when a landlord has a new tenant, they give them some sort of pamphlet or document talking about their rights. Does that document, or do you have a document that you could give them? Because reaching out to tenants is what I'm getting at. There's great ways to get to landlords, but getting to tenants is a little trickier. And that opportunity happens at that moment of signing a lease. And when you're already giving them documents, which surely call out your office, which is a great benefit, if they could also spell out some of their general rights and procedures, as in 2 months to fix my toilet. What do I do? How do I do it? What are the steps? All of these things are covered in the ordinances of our state and of our village, and spelling them out in a concise and easily read document would be of great value to tenants, I believe, and also open up the opportunity to draw them into the community in a way that landlords are already drawn in. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent presentation, good discussion. Before we close, and I see that we have, Ms. Grodnicki maybe would like to address the board, I do want to say one thing first. I'd like to acknowledge that our village manager, John Lockerbie, was instrumental in starting this program 11 years ago. This was John's assignment. And I remember, what were there, John, 16 public meetings? It was
Correct.
a total of 16 public meetings over
18 months.
Yep, 18 months that led to forming this initiative. And it was led by residents. It actually sprang up from the community. So, anyway, good job to all involved.
Thank you.
Public comment? Pardon me? Yes.
Okay, it was about the presentation that we just
Yes.
saw. How often are the inspections being done on a specific, like, for an individual unit?
For an individual unit, who can speak to that? The question was, how often are there inspections of individual units, not the building, but individual
I can
units?
speak to it. I can speak to it. And then Angel, if you want to chime in. So the only time that individual units are inspected are at the point that a rental building is being sold.
Okay, and the reason that I'm asking is twofold. One is, I've talked about this before. This past fall, I did a project on rental housing in Skokie, and part of that was me just walking around trying to gauge if there was a difference in the condition of the buildings of people who were registered as landlords and people who were not registered as landlords, and I found that there was not. But I did see that a lot of these buildings on like Lehman and La Crosse between Dempster and Church are in really bad shape. Like they have ripped screens or cracked windows, the front door doesn't latch. So that's a safety concern, right? And some of the backs of them, the siding was coming off, like it's not in great shape. And so these are things you can see from the exterior. One of the tenants asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, oh, well, my landlord, we've been telling him that the lights in the hallway are not working. They're supposed to be motion activated, but they don't even turn on until you're practically in your own unit. And they've been telling him for months, and he never fixed it. And I have his address if you want it. I mean, not on me, but it's at home. And then a couple of years ago, there was an issue where some of the tenants were coming up and they addressed the board and they said, the cabinet doors are falling off and these other things, and my landlord won't fix them. And they're afraid to report their landlords, right? Michael Lord, even over milkshakes, said to me, tell them, come to me. And I went back to them and they said, we don't want to come to him. Yeah, it was actually milkshakes over at they said, we don't want to come to him because we're afraid of retaliation from our landlord if we file a complaint. So there might not be evictions, but that's maybe because the people realize, like, hey, my landlord is a total jerk and he'll kick me out of the unit if I complain. So I wanted to put that out there. And then through this project also, I talked to one of the landlords, and he was saying that aside from the fact that the landlord training was a waste of his time because he was a lawyer and he already knew it all, so that maybe you should have an exemption for lawyers. I told him about the cabinet doors thing, and he said, well, as a landlord, I'm not obligated to make sure the cabinet doors are on. They don't have to have doors on the cabinets. And I was like, that's a weird thing, but I just want to share with you that this is a condition that some of these units are in, even though we have this program. So in theory, it sounds great, but in practice, it's not working as well. I see my time is up, so thank you.
Thank you. The common thread is more outreach to tenants, and I think there can be a lot of benefits from that, both specific to this program and even just from a community engagement aspect as we enter into our strategic plan in coming months. Be nice to have those folks involved as well. Trustee Levy.
So I think she brings up a really excellent point, which is retaliation and fear of retaliation. And so I think that we probably do need to consider, yes, if people are following this ordinance, the spirit of the ordinance, no problem. But we all know, we've all been in situations where we are afraid to speak up because we fear retaliation. We've all been victims of bullies, I'm sure, in our lives. And in terms of housing, that's a very significant and terrifying place to be. So I don't know that I have a question so much as to reiterate that point that we need to be thinking about how we can ensure tenant safety and figure out what are the pathways to safety if there is a fear of retaliation.
Thank you.
Can I respond?
Trustee Schechter,
Yeah.
sure.
I just wanted to, wearing my fair housing hat, but retaliation, that's a protected category, federal, state, county, I think Skokie as well. So it may not necessarily prevent things, but it is something that, tenants are protected, including protected if they're going to complain to a government body.
So that's where part of that education outreach comes in. Trustee Iverson, and then we're going to close the
And just
discussion.
Very quickly, Chief Barnes mentioned that, referred to the program as a resource. And I think really that's the answer. The more hands that are able to get to that resource, the more empowered tenants are going to feel.
Thank you, everyone. Great report, great discussion.
So items C, D, and E under my report this evening were approved during the consent agenda. Item F is a request for closed session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C5 and C6 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act. A closed session is requested and to adjourn therefrom.
A motion is in order to go into a closed session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C5 and C6 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act. Moved by Trustee Lissa Levy, second by Trustee Kamani Levy. Any comments or discussion from the board? Any comments or discussion from the audience? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Lissa Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovan.
Aye.
Trustee Schechter.
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson.
Aye.
Trustee Iverson.
Aye.
And the motion passes. Thank you, John. Next item is the report of our Corporation Counsel, Barbara Mangler.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees, everybody. Items A and B have already been adopted. with the passage of the consent agenda previously this meeting. Item C, this is an ordinance that will establish the compensation for the village manager, the deputy village clerk, the corporation counsel, and the assistant corporation counsels pursuant to Chapter 2, Article 3 of the Skokie Village Code. This ordinance is consistent with the mayor and board of trustees' direction during the budget planning for the fiscal year 2026 village budget, including approval of cost of living adjustments, COLA, equity adjustments for all village non-union employees, and one positional salary adjustment. This is up for first reading tonight. Second reading will be on the June 16th, 2025 agenda. And that.
We don't need a motion on this. Any discussion, questions? Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. No unfinished business. Under new business, in the packet was a memo from me to all of you about the process, the next step in our process to appoint either a new individual as corporation counsel or to look at hiring a firm to serve in that role, in which we would have a hybrid system, continuing to utilize the assistants corporation counsel who are in the office, and then to utilize an outside firm as the corporation counsel. Are there any, my recommendation is that we should look at both of those tracks and pursue both of those tracks simultaneously. There will be a panel put together of the village manager, 2 department directors of his choosing, 2 attorneys from the community, and there will be an application process with specific criteria for that, and then an outside attorney with municipal legal experience who will serve on the panel that will review both the initial resumes of individual applicants and make those initial interviews, and do the same with firms that apply on that parallel track, and then recommend finalists for each to us, and we will then do the second interviews together as a group in closed session, as is allowed by state law. That is my recommendation. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Trustee Schechter.
Just have a question about this idea of a hybrid situation, because in this chart that was included in the packet that showed other communities, there's almost none of them that do that. I'm just curious as to your thought on that.
Mayor?
Yes.
I thank you. I looked at the chart, and I believe that if it was a contract, that is considered more of a hybrid, that there is somebody there, and then there is a contract of a firm. That's how I looked at it, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, there's a lot of information trying to be boiled down to a digestible format, and so the chart does compare the hybrid. It's really hybrid in that first item about cost is the hybrid model. Legal services for the village are more than what is listed there. It's just for that kind of one responsibility that we're talking about. And then the same for the contractual law firm. That is the amount for kind of that one role. And so, but the chart is then laid out on the advantages or disadvantages of the different format or the different approach. And then at the bottom, of course, the most recent community that is a hybrid is Oak Park. Within the last year, they had a vacancy in their corporation counsel. They filled that primary position with a firm, and then the attorneys that were on staff continue to be on staff. And so that's how the first box of the chart is laid out, and then the benefits and disadvantages of each model are then following, and then Oak Park is at the bottom as a hybrid.
Hoffman Estates also has looks like they have a hybrid system. Trustee Pierce-Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. I support your recommendations and how you would like to tackle or look at the situation, and I support the model that you presented to us.
Thank you, Trustee Pierce-Lovan. Any other questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the audience? Okay.
Is this the 30 minutes? Can I make one comment?
Yeah, I was just going to draw this to a close, and then it's you. No, it's fine. Thank you. We will proceed as outlined, and stay tuned. Again, this is not going to be a quick process. The goal is to have a decision and either a new corporation council or a firm in place for the hybrid model before the, no later than the end of the calendar year 2025. So thank you. Trustee Pierce-Lovan.
Forgive me for being out of order, Mayor.
No, you're fine.
My one comment is, according to the FBI, Jews make up 2% of the U.S. population. However, 68% of all reported religious-based hate crimes are against the Jewish community. Especially following this last recent attack in Colorado, which preceded a Jewish holiday, the Jewish community is probably at an all-time fear. But I want to take this opportunity to recognize Chief Jesse Barnes and our police department, because during the story, while it was unfolding and I was receiving phone calls from the community as we were getting ready to go to the synagogue, I was able to say that I spoke to the chief, and that already the Skokie Police was quite aware that we were in a very complicated situation because it's fear of the unknown. And I want to thank you for being responsive. I want to thank your officers for being sensitive to this situation and for allowing Skokie residents to continue to feel safe in this community. So thank you.
Thank you for expressing that, Trustee Pierce-Lovan. This is a hard time. It's a hard time, and our heart goes out to those in our community who feel threatened and unsafe, and we want everyone to feel welcome and safe here, and we'll continue to work hard for that. Thank you to our police. Okay, is there anyone else who would like, we're in our final public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the village board for 3 minutes? Okay, hearing none, seeing no one jumping up. A motion is in order to adjourn to closed session, and this public meeting will automatically and immediately adjourn without the conduct of any further business or comments. Is there a motion to concur? Trustee Pierce-Lovan, is there a second? Trustee Lissa Levy. Any questions or comments? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Lissa Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovan.
Aye.
Trustee Schechter.
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson.
Aye.
Trustee Iverson.
Aye.
The motion passed, and we are adjourned.